The glass elevator descended through Seoul's midnight skyline like a falling star, and Zuri Adeyemi watched her reflection fracture across the rain-slicked windows. Neon signs bled pink and blue across her dark skin, colors that should have been beautiful but felt like warning lights. Her lipstick was smudged at the corner. Her chest heaved with each breath, and her right palm burned red from the impact. She had just slapped Han Jae-min, the most dangerous man in Seoul. And he hadn't moved. The elevator hummed its mechanical lullaby, but Zuri's heartbeat drowned it out, a war drum in her ears. She pressed her burning palm against the cool glass, trying to ground herself, trying to stop the trembling that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with the way his voice had wrapped around her throat 30 seconds ago. 30 seconds. That's all it had been since she'd stormed out of his penthouse office on the 47th floor. Since her hand had connected with his jaw. Since the world had gone silent except for the soft exhale he'd released, not from pain, but something else entirely. He hadn't flinched, hadn't grabbed her wrist, hadn't raised his voice. He'd simply tilted his head, dark eyes holding hers with terrifying calm, and said, "When I handle you, the only word you'll remember is please." Zuri's reflection shivered. She hated that her body had reacted, heat pooling low in her belly, her breath catching like she'd been the one struck. She hated that even now, descending away from him, she could still feel the weight of those words pressed against her skin. Handle. What the hell did that mean? The elevator slowed. 40th floor. 35th. The city sprawled below like a circuit board, all light and geometry and hidden currents of power. Zuri had learned to navigate those currents. She'd built her career on reading powerful men, on staying 3 steps ahead, on never showing weakness. But Jaemin didn't operate like other powerful men. He didn't shout, didn't posture, didn't make threats. He simply existed in a space where the air felt thinner, where people's voices dropped to whispers, where consequences arrived quietly and absolutely. And tonight, she'd struck him. The elevator chimed. Ground floor. The doors slid open to an empty marble lobby, all polished surfaces and the echo of her heels as she stepped out. The security guard at the desk kept his eyes down. He'd seen her go up an hour ago, all confidence and sharp words. Now she walked past him like a ghost, her Valentino blazer askew, her carefully constructed armor cracked. Her phone buzzed. Zuri stopped. Her hand moved to her purse on instinct, but she hesitated. It buzzed again, insistent. With trembling fingers, she pulled it out. Unknown number. The message made her blood freeze. You shouldn't have hit him. Now he won't let you go. The lobby suddenly felt too large, too empty. Zuri spun, scanning the shadows between marble columns, the darkened cafe in the corner, the rain-blurred windows facing the street. No one. Nothing. Just the security guard, still studiously ignoring her, and the hum of the building's ventilation. She read the message again. Now he won't let you go. Not, he'll come after you, not, you're in danger. But won't let you go like she was already caught. Like leaving his building changed nothing. Like the elevator had been an illusion of escape. Zuri's thumb hovered over the screen. She should call someone. Chisholm. The police. Anyone. Instead, she looked back at the elevator, its brass doors closed now, hiding the ascent back to the 47th floor. Back to him. And despite everything, despite the warning and the fear and the way her palms still burned, she wanted to go back. That terrified her most of all. If you're already hooked, hit that like button and tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? Trust me, you'll want to stay, because what Jaemin does next will leave you speechless. 3 weeks earlier, the conference room on the 32nd floor of the Hanam Tower smelled like expensive cologne and desperation. Zuri Adeyemi sat at the head of the table, her burgundy blazer sharp as a blade, her natural hair pulled back in a way that said professional, but refused to apologize for taking up space. Around her, 5 Korean executives in identical navy suits shifted uncomfortably as she dismantled their quarterly presentation with surgical precision. Slide 14, she said, her British accented English crisp in the silent room. You've projected a 20% increase in luxury consumer engagement, but your demographic data is 3 years old. The Chinese market you're targeting has shifted. Luxury now means experience, not possession. Your entire strategy is chasing ghosts. The lead executive, Mr. Kang, 50-ish, with the kind of confidence that came from never being challenged, opened his mouth to object. Zuri didn't let him. "I'm not finished." She tapped her tablet, and the screen behind her changed to her own analysis. "If you want to survive the next fiscal year, you need to rebuild from the ground up. New brand ambassadors. Experiential pop-ups. And for God's sake, hire a consulting team that understands that luxury consumers under 35 don't care about your legacy. They care about what you're doing now." Silence. Mr. Kang's face had gone red. The others stared at their notepads. Zuri smiled, the smile her mother had taught her. The one that said, "I've won and we both know it," questions. No one dared. This was how Zuri Adeyemi operated. She'd spent 5 years building her reputation in Seoul as the luxury consultant who made powerful men uncomfortable. The Nigerian woman who spoke 3 languages, held degrees from 2 continents, and had never once softened her edges to make someone else feel big. Her mother's voice echoed in her head. "Pride is survival, Zuri. The moment you bow, they'll make you kneel forever." Mama had been a diplomat's wife turned single mother, navigating Lagos and London and finally Seoul when Zuri was 15. She'd taught her daughter that the world would try to categorize her too black, too female, too foreign, too much, and that the only response was to be so undeniably brilliant that categorization became irrelevant. So Zuri became brilliant. And untouchable. And deeply, terrifyingly lonely in a way she never admitted. After the meeting, she stood at the window overlooking Seoul's maze of glass and steel, checking her phone. 3 new client inquiries. A reminder that her visa renewal appointment was in 6 weeks. A text from Chisholm, "Dinner tonight? You need to eat something that isn't ambition and spite." Zuri smiled. Chisholm Okafor, fellow Nigerian expat, photographer, and the only person in Seoul who could make her laugh until she forgot to be guarded. They'd met at an expat meetup 3 years ago and bonded over jollof rice, and shared exhaustion at explaining their hair to curious strangers. She was typing a reply when the conference room door opened behind her. "Ms. Adeyemi." The voice was quiet. Male. Unfamiliar. Zuri turned. The man in the doorway wasn't like the executives she'd just eviscerated. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, but he wore it with the ease of someone who didn't think about money. Mid-30s. Sharp jawline. Dark eyes that assessed her with the kind of stillness that made her instincts flare. "Director Park," he introduced himself with a slight bow. "I represent a private client interested in your consultation services." "I'm booked through the quarter," Zuri said automatically, though her curiosity was piqued. Private clients usually meant serious money. "You can submit a request through my website." "My employer doesn't submit requests," Park interrupted gently. "He makes offers." Something about the phrasing made Zuri's spine straighten. "Then your employer can learn to wait like everyone else." Park's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Surprise? Amusement? "He said you'd say that." "Then why waste both our time?" "Because he's waiting downstairs." Park stepped aside, gesturing toward the elevator. 5 minutes of your time, Ms. Adeyemi. If you're not interested after that, you'll never hear from us again." Zuri should have said no. Every instinct her mother had honed in her screamed that men who didn't take no for an answer were men who didn't understand boundaries. But curiosity was her weakness. And pride. The need to look any powerful man in the eye and prove she couldn't be impressed. 5 minutes, she agreed. The cafe on the ground floor was one of those minimalist spaces where coffee cost $15 and silence was enforced by atmosphere. Park led her to a corner table where a man sat alone, his back to them, staring out at the rain beginning to fall. He didn't turn when they approached. "Mr. Han," Park said quietly. "Ms. Adeyemi." The man stood and turned in one fluid motion, and Zuri felt her prepared speech evaporate. Han Jaemin was beautiful in the way dangerous things were beautiful, elegant, controlled, with an undercurrent of something that made you want to step closer and run simultaneously. He wasn't tall by Korean standards, maybe 5'10", but he carried himself with the kind of presence that made height irrelevant. His face was all clean lines and sharp angles, his dark hair styled simply, his expression neutral in a way that felt deliberate. But it was his eyes that caught her. Dark and steady and impossibly calm, like deep water. Ms. Adeyemi. He didn't offer his hand. Thank you for indulging my impatience. His English was perfect, barely accented. His voice was quiet, the kind of quiet that made you lean in to hear. Zuri didn't lean in. You have 4 minutes left, she said. The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile. Direct. I appreciate that. He gestured to the chair across from him. I own several luxury properties in Seoul. Hotels. Private clubs. A gallery. One of my lounge concepts is failing. I need someone to tell me why and fix it. You need a consultant. I gave you my website. I need you. His gaze held hers. I've watched you dismantle 3 competitors' strategies this month. You don't just understand luxury markets, you understand pride. What makes people pay for the illusion of exclusivity? He paused. That's rare. Zuri sat. Not because he'd convinced her, but because her legs had made the decision before her brain caught up. What's the failure rate? 70% occupancy loss in 6 months. She blinked. That wasn't failure. That was hemorrhaging. And you waited until now to address it? I was waiting for you to become available. I'm not available. Name your price. Mr. Han. Jaemin, he corrected quietly. Mr. Han, Zuri repeated firmly. I don't work for men who think money solves everything. Good. He leaned back, and for the first time, she saw something other than calm in his expression, interest. Because I'm not offering you money alone. I'm offering you complete creative control. No board approval. No committee reviews. You tell me what to do, and I do it. That stopped her. In 5 years, no client had offered her actual power. They hired her for opinions they'd ignore the moment her ideas threatened their egos. Why? She asked. Because you were right in that conference room. Jaemin's voice dropped even lower. Legacy means nothing if you're irrelevant. And I'd rather burn my own empire than watch it die slowly. Zuri studied him. Looked for the catch. The hidden angle. The moment where his reasonable offer would come with unreasonable strings. She found nothing but that terrible, magnetic calm. One project, she heard herself say. I assess the lounge, give you a strategy, implement it. 3 months. After that, we're done. Agreed. And I don't soften my recommendations. If I tell you your concept is garbage, you don't fire me for honesty. I'm hiring you for honesty, Ms. Adeyemi. She should have walked away. Should have recognized the way his attention felt like standing too close to a fire. Should have listened to the voice in her head that sounded like her mother. Some men are dangerous not because they take, but because they make you want to give. Instead, Zuri extended her hand. You have a deal. His hand closed around hers, warm, steady, and somehow more intimate than a handshake should be. I look forward to working with you, Jaemin said. And as Zuri left the cafe, she felt Director Park's eyes tracking her like she was a chess piece that had just moved into position. She told herself it was just business. She was already lying to herself. The restaurant occupied the 63rd floor of a building Zuri hadn't known existed, one of those spaces where reservations required connections, not money. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased Seoul like a jewel box, the Han River a dark ribbon threaded with light. Their table sat in a private corner where the city felt like a secret being shared. Zuri had spent 2 weeks analyzing Jaemin's failing lounge. She'd walked the space a dozen times, interviewed staff, reviewed financials until her eyes burned. Tonight was supposed to be her final presentation before implementation began. Instead, Jaemin had barely glanced at her proposal. Your analysis is flawless, he said, setting down the folder. A server materialized to pour wine, something red and probably obscenely expensive. The rebrand will work. Then why do you look like you're about to fire me? Zuri asked. I'm about to offer you a different position. He lifted his glass, but didn't drink, his dark eyes steady on hers. Personal advisor. Permanent. You'd oversee not just the lounge, but strategic direction for my entire portfolio. Hotels, galleries, investments. Zuri's heart kicked against her ribs. That's not consulting. That's power, Jaemin finished. Real influence over decisions that move millions. A salary that reflects that. He named a figure that made her forget to breathe. She forced herself to think past the number. Why me? There are 50 consultants in Seoul who'd kill for this. Precisely why I don't want them. He finally sipped his wine. They'd kill for it. They'd compromise themselves, reshape their opinions to match mine, become extensions of my ego. He set down the glass. You're the only person who doesn't pretend to agree with me. That's worth more than confidence. Zuri studied him across the table. The ambient lighting softened his sharp features, but his expression remained unreadable, that maddening calm that never cracked. She thought of her visa renewal hanging in bureaucratic limbo. Her mother's voice asking when she'd stop chasing contracts and build something stable. The way her bank account hemorrhaged every month. Seoul decided to be expensive. Professional boundaries, she said finally. I'm your advisor, not your accessory. I attend meetings, not galas. I give you strategy, not companionship. Something flickered across his face. Disappointment? Amusement? It vanished too quickly to identify. Agreed. And if you ever mistake my employment for ownership, I walk. No notice. No negotiation. Understood. He extended his hand across the table. Zuri hesitated. This felt like more than a business deal. Felt like stepping across a threshold she couldn't see but could sense, the way animals sense earthquakes before they hit. She shook his hand anyway. His fingers were warm, his grip firm but not aggressive. He held on a fraction too long, his thumb brushing across her knuckles in a gesture that could have been accidental. It wasn't. Welcome to the Empire, Ms. Adeyemi, he said quietly. 2 hours later, Zuri was drunk on possibility and halfway through her second soju cocktail at a bar in Itaewon. Chisholm sat across from her, laughing so hard she'd given up on her mascara. You told Han Jaemin, the Han Jaemin, that you're not his accessory? Chisholm wheezed. Girl, you have a death wish. I have boundaries. Zuri grinned, feeling reckless and powerful and like maybe Seoul was finally hers to conquer. Besides, he agreed. Very civilized. Very professional. Chisholm's eyes danced. And how professional were you when he touched your hand? He was sealing a deal. He was sealing something, but it wasn't just business. Chisholm leaned forward conspiratorially. Zuri. That man looks at you like you're the only person in the room. Every room. I've seen the photos from that conference last month. There are photos? You're working for one of Seoul's most eligible recluses. Of course there are photos. Zuri's buzz faded slightly. She hadn't considered visibility. How their professional relationship would look from outside. How people would interpret a black woman suddenly elevated to Jaemin's inner circle. She was reaching for her phone to Google herself when a hand clamped around her wrist. You're beautiful, a voice slurred in Korean. A businessman 50-ish, reeking of soju and entitlement, had materialized beside their table. His grip tightened. Come have a drink with me and my friends. Zuri switched to Korean, her voice ice. Let go. Don't be rude. Let go. She tried to pull back. His fingers dug in harder. Chisholm was already standing, her voice rising. A few other patrons turned to look, but this was Korea. Intervention in public disputes wasn't common. Then a shadow fell across their table. Remove your hand. The voice was quiet. Lethally quiet. Zuri's head snapped up. Jaemin stood 3 feet away, still in his dinner suit, his expression empty of everything except a cold focus that made the temperature drop. The businessman's bravado faltered. This is none of your. Jaemin moved closer, not aggressive, just present in a way that made the other man's grip slacken. He leaned down and whispered something in Korean too low for Zuri to hear. Whatever he said drained the color from the businessman's face. The man released Zuri's wrist like it had burned him, stumbled backward, and fled the bar without looking back. The entire exchange took 15 seconds. Zuri sat frozen, her wrist throbbing, her mind trying to process what had just happened. Jaemin turned to her, his expression softening marginally. Are you hurt? I know. I had it handled. I know. His gaze dropped to her wrist where red marks were already forming. Something dangerous moved behind his eyes. But you shouldn't have to. What did you say to him? Chisholm asked, still standing, protective and fascinated. Nothing that matters. Jaemin looked at Zuri. I'm taking you home. I can take a taxi. Zuri. The use of her first name stopped her. Please. She found herself nodding. Found herself letting him guide her out of the bar with Chisholm trailing behind, whispering furiously that she'd call later. Found herself in the back of a black sedan that smelled like leather and rain, the city sliding past in neon streaks. Silence filled the space between them, heavy, charged, crackling with things neither would say. You were at that bar, Zuri said finally. Why? I own the building. He stared straight ahead. I often walk through at night. Convenient. Yes. He didn't elaborate. The car glided through empty streets. Zuri watched their reflections in the window, two silhouettes barely separate, tension visible even in shadow. Are you afraid of me? Jaemin asked suddenly. The question caught her off guard. No. He turned then, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. You should be. Not because I'd hurt you, but because you'll want me to. Her voice failed. Heat flooded her face, her body. Not physical harm, he continued, his voice dropping lower. But I'll ask you to trust me in ways that terrify you. I'll make you want to give up control. And when you do, you'll hate yourself for how much you need it. The car stopped. Her apartment building. Zuri fumbled for the door handle, her hands shaking. This stays professional, she managed. You promised. I promised to respect boundaries. His eyes never left hers. But I never promised not to want you, Zuri. I never promised I wouldn't show you what you could have if you stopped being so afraid of wanting something back. She got out. Slammed the door. Stood on the sidewalk in the rain that had started falling, watching his car disappear into Seoul's endless maze. Her wrist still burned where the businessman had grabbed her. But her skin burned hotter where Jaemin's words had landed. Morning arrived with a hangover and an email that made her stomach drop. Subject: Visa application status update. Dear Ms. Adeyemi, your visa renewal application has been flagged for additional review. Please be advised that your current visa status remains valid pending investigation. No estimated completion date available. No appeal process available at this time. Zuri read it 3 times. Flagged. Investigation. No appeal. She hadn't done anything wrong. Hadn't violated any terms. Hadn't. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Ms. Adeyemi? A woman's voice, professional, cold. This is regarding your visa status. We need you to come in for an interview. Bring all original documentation. What is this about? Routine verification. Can you come today at 2 p.m.? It wasn't a question. Zuri agreed, hung up, and stared at her apartment walls closing in. Seoul had been hers. She'd built everything here. And now someone was threatening to take it away. She thought of Jaemin's words, "You'll want me to," and hated that part of her already did. The visa interview was a nightmare dressed as bureaucracy. 3 hours of questions about her employment history, her finances, her relationships. Why she was working for Han Jaemin. How she'd secured the position. Whether she understood Korean employment law regarding foreign consultants. They implied nothing. They accused her of nothing. But the message was clear. Someone wanted her looking over her shoulder. 2 weeks crawled past. Zuri threw herself into work, spending 12-hour days in Jaemin's office suite redesigning his empire piece by piece. The lounge rebrand was just the beginning. He wanted her assessment on everything. She delivered brutally honest analyses that would have gotten her fired from any other position. Jaemin implemented every single recommendation. The work should have been exhilarating. Instead, it felt like standing on a tightrope where the only thing keeping her balanced was his steady presence on the other side. Late nights became their routine. His office on the 47th floor had floor-to-ceiling windows that made Seoul look like a kingdom they were plotting to conquer. Sometimes Director Park joined them, his cold efficiency a stark contrast to the strange intimacy that built between Zuri and Jaemin when they were alone. You hate this gallery acquisition, Jaemin observed one night, studying her expression rather than the proposal on screen. I don't hate it. I think it's ego. Zuri pulled up financial projections. You don't need another gallery. You want it because the current owner told you no. Perhaps. He leaned back, that almost smile playing at his lips. And if I admitted you're right? Then I'd wonder why you're wasting my time asking questions you already know the answers to. Maybe I like hearing you say it. The admission hung between them. Outside, Seoul glittered, 10 million people living lives that never intersected with the strange gravity developing in this room. Zuri stood to get water, needing distance. The office was cold. Jaemin kept it perpetually Arctic. Before she could comment, he was behind her, draping his suit jacket over her shoulders. The gesture was simple, thoughtful, devastating. His cologne clung to the fabric, something dark and woody that made her want to bury her face in it. She froze, hyper-aware of his proximity, the way his fingers lingered for a fraction of a second on her shoulders before he stepped away. You should eat something, he said. You've been living on coffee. I'm fine. You're running yourself into the ground. He pulled out his phone, ordered food in rapid Korean. When he hung up, his expression had shifted serious, assessing. What happened at your visa interview? Zuri tensed. How do you know about that? Zuri. Just her name. An answer and a non-answer. They asked questions. Lots of questions about you, actually. She turned to face him. Should I be worried? About me? No. He moved to the window, his reflection a dark outline against the city. About the people who want you gone? Yes. What people? Competitors. Old guard executives who don't appreciate being exposed as incompetent. Men with egos bigger than their portfolios. His voice remained level. You've made enemies by being excellent, Zuri. That's the cost. She should have been angry. Should have demanded answers, explanations, solutions. Instead, she found herself studying the line of his shoulders, the way stress showed only in the set of his jaw, the terrible loneliness of standing at the top with no one who understood. Tell me something real, she said suddenly. He turned, surprised. What? Something that's not strategy or business. Something human. She wrapped his jacket tighter. I need to know you're not just a very sophisticated AI. That almost smile became almost real. My father died when I was 17. Heart attack during a business dinner. He collapsed between the appetizer and main course. Jaemin's voice didn't change, but his eyes did, something raw breaking through. Everyone kept eating. Kept their meeting going. He was dead on the floor and they kept eating. Jaemin. I built this empire on his corpse, he continued. Used his contacts, his money, his reputation. And I promised myself I'd never be like them. Never so consumed by power that I forgot people weren't transactions. He met her eyes. But sometimes I wonder if I've become exactly what I hated. The honesty gutted her. Zuri crossed the space between them without thinking, without her usual careful calculation. You're not, she said. You're. The door opened. Director Park stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable but his timing impeccable. Mr. Han. The Busan investors are calling. The moment shattered. Jaemin nodded, his mask sliding back into place. Thank you, Park. But his eyes stayed on Zuri for a beat too long, and she saw the question there, the same one burning in her chest. What if we stopped pretending this is just business? The next morning brought disaster dressed as an email. Contract termination notice. Her biggest independent client, the one that wasn't Jaemin, was canceling. Effective immediately. No explanation. Just a sterile corporate apology and a kill fee that wouldn't cover her rent. Zuri stared at her laptop screen, nausea rising. Then her phone exploded. Messages from other expat consultants. Screenshots from Korean business forums. Rumors spreading like wildfire through Seoul's luxury sector. Zuri Adeyemi is Han Jaemin's mistress. She slept her way into his company. Everything she's accomplished is because she's warming his bed. Chisholm called, her voice tight with fury. Have you seen this? Zuri, they're destroying you. I see it. Her voice sounded distant, disconnected. Who would do this? Who benefits from? Chisholm stopped. Oh God. I saw Director Park last week. He was at Immigration Services, talking to officials. Zuri, what if Jaemin's people are behind your visa problems? No, but even as she said it, doubt crept in. What did she really know about Jaemin? About the networks of power he controlled? Think about it, Chisholm pressed. Your visa gets flagged right after you start working for him. Your client cancels. Now these rumors? Zuri, what if he's manufacturing a situation where you're completely dependent on him? Zuri ended the call, grabbed her bag, took a taxi to Jaemin's building with fury burning away everything else. She stormed past his assistant, past Director Park's half-hearted attempt to stop her, straight into Jaemin's office, where he stood reviewing contracts. Did you do this? She shoved her phone at him, showing the rumors. Did you destroy my reputation to trap me here? He set down his pen with careful precision. No. My visa. My client. These rumors. It's all too coordinated. Zuri, tell me the truth. Her voice cracked. Are you sabotaging my life? I'm saving your life. He moved around the desk, his composure finally fracturing. 3 different networks wanted you gone. You insulted the wrong people, refused to play their games, made them look weak. They were going to destroy you, completely, permanently. So you did it first? I stepped in where others would have stomped. His voice rose for the first time since she'd met him. Your visa review? I'm the reason it's a review and not a denial. Your client? They were pressured to drop you by competitors. I didn't cause your problems, Zuri. I'm the only reason you're still standing. The admission hung between them like a blade. I never asked for your protection, she said, her voice shaking. You never had to. They stood 3 feet apart, both breathing hard, the office suddenly too small. Souls sprawled beyond the windows, indifferent, glittering, hungry. Why? Zuri demanded. Why protect me? Why care what happens to some consultant who challenges you? Jaemin closed the distance. Not aggressive, but inevitable, like gravity. Because you're the first person in 10 years who's made me feel human instead of useful. His hand rose, cupping her face with devastating gentleness. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. His eyes asked a question his voice didn't. Zuri's heart hammered. She should pull away. Should maintain her boundaries. Should remember that wanting him was exactly what would prove the rumors true. This is exactly what they'll say, she whispered. That I'm just another woman you collected. His jaw tightened. His hand dropped. Then prove them wrong. Stay brilliant. Stay impossible. His voice lowered to that dangerous register. But stop pretending you don't feel this too. Feel what? She forced the words out. That I want you? That I think about you constantly? That I'm terrified because you're the first man I've ever met who makes me want to stop fighting. Yes. The word was barely audible. All of that. They were inches apart now. She could feel his breath. Could see the fracture lines in his control. Could reach out and... She stepped back. I won't be the woman who needed you, Zuri said. I won't give them that satisfaction. Something like pain crossed his face. Even if it means denying what's real? Especially then. She left before he could respond. Before she could change her mind. Before she could do what her body was screaming for and close the distance between them. In the elevator, her phone buzzed. Another message. Another warning. Another piece of her world crumbling. And the terrifying realization that Jaemin was right. She was already caught in his gravity. The only question was whether she'd fight it or let herself fall. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, slipped under Zuri's apartment door while she was at Jaemin's office pretending everything was fine. No return address. No postage. Just her name written in block letters that revealed nothing about the sender. She opened it standing in her kitchen, still in her coat, exhausted from another 14-hour day of redesigning an empire while her own life disintegrated around her. Inside, photocopies of legal documents. Financial records. Contracts stamped with official seals and signatures she didn't recognize. And one clause highlighted in yellow that made her blood turn to ice. Protection Agreement, Consortium Liability Shield. In the event of financial collapse, legal investigation, or public scandal affecting primary assets of the Han Investment Group, a designated foreign consultant shall serve as liability absorption point. Said individual will assume responsibility for financial irregularities, enabling preservation of core network integrity. Foreign consultants in luxury sector consultation roles are eligible for designation upon employment commencement. The document was dated 3 years ago. Before she'd ever set foot in Jaemin's office. Before she'd even known his name. Her hands shook as she flipped through the pages. There, an amendment dated 6 months ago. A list of names, most crossed out or marked inactive. At the bottom, in fresh ink, Zuri Adeyemi, active designation. 6 months ago. Right when she'd started making waves in Seoul's luxury sector. Right when she'd become visible enough to be useful. Right when Han Jae-min would have first heard her name. The kitchen tilted. Zuri grabbed the counter, her mind racing through every interaction with clinical precision. The coffee shop meeting where he'd offered her the job. I was waiting for you to become available. The protection from threats she hadn't known existed. I'm the only reason you're still here. The careful boundaries he'd respected, keeping her clean. Keeping her credible, keeping her viable as a scapegoat. She wasn't his advisor. She was his insurance policy. Everything made sense now. The generous salary that made her dependent. The projects that tied her name to his empire. The protection that looked like care but was really investment. You don't let your insurance policy get destroyed before you need it. Zuri didn't cry. Something beyond tears was happening, a glacial numbness spreading through her chest, turning her heart to stone. She'd survived her mother's brutal lessons about trust. Survived Seoul's casual racism and sexism. Survived being underestimated and objectified. But this? Being groomed for destruction by the one man she'd almost let herself trust? This was a different kind of violence. She grabbed her keys. Jaemin's penthouse occupied the top floor of a building in Hanamdong where security cost more than most people's salaries. Zuri had been there once before for a strategy meeting, back when she'd thought she mattered for her mind rather than her expendability. The doorman recognized her. Let her up without calling ahead. She didn't knock. The door was unlocked, typical Jaemin arrogance, the belief that power was protection enough. The penthouse was exactly as she remembered, minimalist, expensive, empty of anything that revealed the man who lived there. She found him in his office, standing at the window with a glass of whiskey, still in his suit despite the late hour. He turned when she entered, and for a fraction of a second, something like relief crossed his face. Zuri. She threw the documents at him. Papers scattered across his pristine floor like evidence at a crime scene. Was any of it real? Her voice cracked despite her best efforts. Despite 3 years of training herself never to show weakness. Jaemin looked at the papers. Didn't bend to pick them up. Didn't pretend confusion. Where did you get those? Does it matter? She laughed, bitter, sharp. Answer the question. Was any of it real, or was I just a very expensive insurance policy you were keeping warm? His jaw tightened. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. Her voice rose. You signed a contract designating me as your scapegoat. My name, Jaemin. My life. You planned to destroy me if things went wrong. It was insurance I never intended to use. But you could use it. She moved closer, her hands shaking. You could wake up tomorrow and decide I'm expendable, and I'd be arrested for crimes I didn't commit. My reputation destroyed. My future erased. And you'd walk away untouched. The world I live in requires leverage, Zuri. His composure was fracturing, voice tight. I didn't know you then. I didn't know. He stopped, jaw clenched so hard she could see the muscle jump. Didn't know what? She demanded. That I would fall in love with you. The words hit like a physical blow. Zuri stepped back, her breath catching. Of all the things he could have said, this was the cruelest. This was the knife twisted after the initial wound. No, tears finally came, hot, furious, unstoppable. You don't get to say that. You don't get to love me and hold a knife to my throat at the same time. I'm trying to fix it. How? She wiped her eyes angrily. How do you fix being expendable? How do you unwrite a contract that says my life is worth less than your empire? Jaemin moved toward her, then stopped like he'd hit an invisible wall. I've been trying to void the contract for weeks. Since I realized what you meant to me. Trying. It requires unanimous consent from 5 shadow investors. 3 have agreed to dissolution. His voice dropped. 2 are blocking me. And one of them, he stopped, something dangerous moving behind his eyes. One of them is positioning to trigger the clause. To use you to destroy me. The room felt airless. What? They know. He picked up his whiskey glass, then set it down without drinking. They know I care about you. They know it makes me vulnerable. If I can't break this contract, someone else will trigger it. They'll manufacture evidence, file charges, leak everything to the press. And they'll use you to bury me. Zuri's mind raced. Then let them. He stared at her. What? Let them. Her voice was steel now, tears dried to fury. I will never love a man whose power requires my destruction. If keeping your empire means sacrificing me, then your empire deserves to burn. Zuri. I mean it. She moved to the door. I'd rather be destroyed on my own terms than protected on yours. Please. The word broke something in him. He crossed the space between them, not touching but close enough that she could feel his desperation. Give me 1 week. Let me fix this. You can't fix what you built into the foundation. Her hand was on the doorknob. This isn't a contract problem, Jaemin. It's a you problem. You live in a world where people are leverage, where love is liability, where someone like me is worth less than someone like you. I don't believe that. But you signed it anyway. She opened the door. That's the difference between us. I would have burned everything rather than sign a contract with your name on it. She walked out. He didn't follow. In the elevator descending from his penthouse, Zuri's phone buzzed. A text from the same unknown number that had warned her weeks ago. You should have left when you had the chance. Now you'll leave in pieces. She deleted it, stared at her reflection in the polished brass doors, and realized that for the first time since coming to Seoul, she had nothing left to lose. That should have felt like freedom. Instead, it felt like falling. 3 days passed like a funeral dirge. Zuri moved out of her apartment, couldn't afford it anymore without her cancelled client contracts. She showed up at Chisholm's door with 2 suitcases and a face carved from stone. How bad? Chisholm asked. Apocalyptic. She'd stopped answering Jaemin's calls after the first dozen. Stopped reading his texts after they shifted from explanations to apologies to desperate pleas. Stopped checking the news after the 3rd article speculating about their relationship. Her phone became a weapon she couldn't put down. On the 2nd day, Director Park called. Professional, cold, Mr. Han has decided to restructure his advisory team. We're moving in a different direction. Your final payment will be processed within 30 days. Fired. Not by Jaemin himself. He didn't even have the courage for that. On the 3rd day, the visa denial became official. A formal letter from Immigration Services, bureaucratically polite, devastating in its finality. Your application for renewal has been denied. You have 14 days to settle your affairs and depart the Republic of Korea. 14 days. Chisholm found Zuri on her couch at 3 a.m., laptop open to flight comparison sites, Lagos to Seoul routes glowing blue in the darkness. Zoo. Chisholm's voice was gentle. Come to bed. Maybe he was right. Zuri's voice sounded hollow. Maybe this city was always going to crush me. Maybe I was stupid to think I could build something here. You're not stupid. You're brilliant, and they're terrified of you. They're destroying me, and I can't even see who's doing it. She closed the laptop. How do you fight ghosts? Chisholm sat beside her, pulling Zuri's head onto her shoulder. They stayed like that until dawn bled through the windows, 2 women holding each other against a city that had decided they didn't belong. Jaemin's office felt like a mausoleum. Director Park stood across from him, holding unsigned dissolution papers that represented the end of everything. Outside, Seoul glittered, indifferent, eternal, hungry. If you void this contract without full consent, you'll lose everything, Park said. Not a threat. A fact. Your reputation, your empire, your safety. The remaining investors will retaliate. They'll strip your assets, freeze your accounts, expose every gray area you've ever operated in. Jaemin stared at the papers. His signature line waited, blank, accusatory. They're already moving, Park continued. Lee Sang-woo has positioned himself to trigger the liability clause. He's manufacturing evidence as we speak. If you don't act first. I'm not using her. Jaemin's voice was quiet. Final. Then you're choosing her over everything your father built. Over every sacrifice you've made. Over. I'm choosing her over becoming my father. He looked at Park. He taught me power was the only thing that mattered. That people were tools. That love was weakness. His hands clenched. He died alone between courses while people kept eating. I won't become that. Park's expression didn't change. Sentiment doesn't pay debts, Mr. Han. Then I'll learn to live without what debts bought. He picked up a pen, stared at the dissolution papers, and couldn't sign. Not because he was afraid of losing his empire, but because signing meant accepting he'd created a world where loving Zuri required her destruction. The news broke on the fourth day. Zuri woke to her phone exploding with notifications. Messages from colleagues, former clients, people she barely knew. All linking to the same articles spreading like wildfire across Korean business sites. Fraud allegations rock luxury sector. Foreign consultant accused of embezzlement. Han investment group victim of elaborate scheme. Her face was everywhere. Professional photos stolen from her website, now attached to words like theft and deception and criminal investigation. The articles claimed she'd embezzled over 2 billion won from Jaemin's company. That she'd falsified project reports, inflated invoices, used her position to funnel money to offshore accounts. All lies. All meticulously documented with forged evidence that looked horrifyingly real. They're setting you up. Chisholm stared at her phone, face pale. Zuri, this is coordinated. Professional. This is someone with resources. Zuri read the articles with numb detachment. The embezzlement timeline coincided perfectly with her employment. The evidence trail pointed to her and her alone. And the narrative was brilliant. Foreign consultant seduces powerful Korean businessman, steals from his empire, flees the country. It was exactly what the contract had specified. Someone had triggered the liability clause. I need to call a lawyer, Zuri said mechanically. With what money? You can't even afford rent. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered anyway. What was left to lose? Ms. Adeyemi? A woman's voice, crisp, legal. I'm calling on behalf of Han Investment Group. We're filing civil charges for breach of contract and fraud. You'll receive formal notification within 24 hours. I didn't steal anything. We have documentation. Bank records. Testimony. You should secure legal representation immediately. A pause. Though I understand your visa status makes that complicated. The call ended. Chisholm's arms came around her as Zuri finally broke. Not crying, something deeper. A sound like an animal caught in a trap, realizing the only escape is to chew off its own leg. I can't fight this, Zuri gasped. If I stay and fight, I'm trapped here for years with no money, no job, facing criminal charges. If I leave, you're a fugitive. They'll put out warrants. You'll never be able to travel freely again. I can't win. The words tasted like ash. They've cornered me perfectly. A knock at the door made them both jump. Chisholm checked the peephole, then opened it to reveal a courier holding a manila envelope. Zuri Adeyemi? Zuri took it with shaking hands. The courier left. Inside, a civil complaint. 37 pages detailing her alleged crimes. And a handwritten note in Korean that Chisholm had to translate. You should have stayed in your place. Now you'll learn it. Zuri sat on the floor. Let the papers scatter around her. Let the weight of impossible choices press down until she couldn't breathe. 14 days until deportation. Criminal charges that would follow her globally. Civil lawsuits that would bankrupt her even if she won. And somewhere in this city, the man she'd almost loved was either fighting for her or letting her burn. She didn't even know which possibility hurt more. What do I do? She whispered. Chisholm sat beside her, gathering papers, gathering her friend. We figure it out. Together. But they both knew the truth. There was no figuring this out. The trap had already sprung. And Zuri was caught in jaws made of contracts and lies and the kind of power that made people disappear. That night, unable to sleep, Zuri checked her email one last time. One new message. From Jaemin's corporate account. Subject line, I'm sorry. She deleted it without reading. Some apologies came too late. And some love, if it had ever been real, wasn't worth the destruction it required. Outside Chisholm's window, Seoul blazed with light. Beautiful. Indifferent. Hungry. And Zuri Adeyemi, brilliant, proud, unbreakable, finally understood what it meant to be consumed. Dawn broke over Seoul like a wound, and Zuri woke to her phone vibrating off Chisholm's coffee table. 17 missed calls. 43 messages. news alerts flooding her screen faster than she could read them. Her voice was rough from crying. Wake up. Chisholm stumbled out of her bedroom, saw Zuri's face, and grabbed her own phone. Her eyes went wide. Oh my God. The headlines were everywhere. Han Jae-min exposes corruption network in shocking press conference. Luxury mogul dismantles own empire to clear consultant's name. I will not let an innocent woman burn for my sins. Zuri's hands shook as she pulled up the video. The press conference had been held at 6 a.m. in the lobby of Jaemin's headquarters. He stood at a podium, no prepared statement, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His suit was impeccable, but his eyes were devastated. My name is Han Jae-min, he began, voice steady despite the cameras. And I'm here to confess. Zuri turned up the volume, her heart hammering. 3 years ago, I signed a protection agreement with a consortium of 5 investors. The agreement included a liability shield clause, a mechanism to designate foreign consultants as scapegoats in the event of financial or legal crisis. He paused. 6 months ago, Zuri Adeyemi's name was added to that list. Not because she was guilty of anything, but because she was visible, foreign, and therefore expendable. The press erupted. Jaemin waited for silence. This practice is not unique to my organization. It's systemic. It's how powerful men in the city, in many cities, protect themselves. By building escape hatches on the backs of people with less power. His jaw tightened. My father taught me this was simply business. That leverage was survival. That some people mattered and others were tools. He pulled out documents, held them up to the cameras. These are the names of the 5 investors who participated in this scheme: Lee Sang-woo, Park Jin-ho, Choi Min-jun, Kim Dae-hyun, and my own director Park. He read each name slowly, deliberately. Lee Sang-woo specifically triggered the liability clause against Ms. Adeyemi when I refused to use it myself. The embezzlement charges are fabricated. I have recordings, financial evidence, communications that prove her complete innocence. Zuri's breath caught as he proceeded to systematically dismantle the case against her, showing how Lee had forged documents, how the timeline didn't match her actual employment, how the offshore accounts didn't exist. Ms. Adeyemi is guilty of nothing except being brilliant enough to threaten men who mistake cruelty for power. His voice cracked. And I am guilty of everything. I created the system that put her at risk. I signed the contract that made her expendable. He stopped, composing himself. I fell in love with her knowing I had built her cage. The room went silent. So I'm dissolving the contract publicly. I'm exposing the network. And I'm accepting full responsibility for every consequence. He looked directly into the camera. My reputation is over. My business partnerships are ending as I speak. But Zuri Adeyemi walks away free. That's not negotiable. He stepped away from the podium. Ignored the shouted questions. Walked out as the press conference dissolved into chaos. The video ended. Zuri sat frozen, tears streaming down her face. He just committed professional suicide, Chisholm whispered. For you. The day unfolded like a wildfire. Jaemin's business partners issued statements distancing themselves. The investors he'd named threatened legal action. 3 major contracts were terminated before noon. His stock portfolio plummeted. Financial analysts predicted his empire would be dismantled within a week. But the corruption allegations couldn't be ignored. Authorities opened investigations. The media dug into the consortium's practices. And public opinion, fickle, powerful, turned against the men who'd built fortunes on invisible violence. At 3 p.m., another headline. Director Park arrested on embezzlement charges. Zuri called Chisholm over to read the article together. Park had been arrested at Incheon Airport attempting to flee to Singapore. Authorities found evidence of systematic theft from Jaemin's companies, money siphoned over years, hidden in the chaos of legitimate operations. But the real revelation came from a source. Park had leaked the original contract documents to Zuri. Not to save her, but to force Jaemin's hand. To create a crisis where Jaemin would either sacrifice her, destroying his own humanity, or refuse and watch his empire collapse, leaving Park to seize control in the vacuum. He played you both, Chisholm said softly. Zuri stared at Park's face in the mugshot. Cold. Calculating. A man who'd spent years next to power, watching it, wanting it, willing to burn everything to claim it. That evening, a lawyer appeared at Chisholm's door. Expensive suit, measured words, representing a Mr. Kim Dae-hyun, one of the investors Jaemin had exposed. "My client is impressed by your resilience, Ms. Adeyemi." The lawyer laid out documents on Chisholm's kitchen table. "He's offering you an opportunity, a new visa, a position in his Singapore operations, complete protection from any remaining legal complications. Salary commensurate with your skills." Zuri scanned the contract. It was generous. Legitimate. A clean escape from the wreckage. "Why would he help me?" she asked. "He admires people who survive powerful men." The lawyer's smile didn't reach his eyes. "And he believes you'd be a valuable asset far from Seoul's complications." "She'll take it," Chisholm said immediately. "Zhu, this is your way out." "I need time to think." The lawyer nodded. "You have until tomorrow morning. After that, the offer expires and you'll have to navigate the fallout on your own." He stood. "Choose wisely, Ms. Adeyemi. Not everyone gets a second chance." After he left, Chisholm turned on her. "What is there to think about? He destroyed himself for you. That doesn't mean you have to go down with his ship." "He didn't ask me to." "Exactly. He gave you an out. He made sure you could leave clean. Don't waste that sacrifice by staying in a city that's tried to destroy you." Zuri walked to the window. Seoul sprawled below, neon and concrete, beautiful and brutal, the city that had tested her and broken her and somehow, impossibly, taught her what love looked like when it cost everything. "He never trapped me," she said quietly. "That's what I finally understand. The contract, the protection, even the cage he built, he was trying to save me the only way he knew how. And when I chose to leave, he let me go. So leave now. While you can." "But I don't want to." Zuri turned, tears on her face, but certainty in her voice. "I've spent my whole life running from powerful men, proving I didn't need them, building walls so high that no one could reach me." She picked up the Singapore contract. "He tore down his empire rather than keep me in a cage. The least I can do is stop running from my own heart." She ripped the contract in half. Chisholm stared. "You're insane." "Probably." Zuri grabbed her coat. "But I'm done being afraid of wanting something. Of wanting someone. Where are you going?" "To make a terrible decision." She smiled, genuine, terrified, free. "And defend it brilliantly." The penthouse door was unlocked again, either arrogance or hope. Zuri couldn't tell which. She let herself in, her heart hammering against her ribs like it was trying to escape the decision she'd made. Jaemin stood at the window, same position as 5 days ago when her world had shattered. He wore slacks and a white shirt, no jacket, sleeves rolled up like he'd stopped caring about armor. When he turned and saw her, the shock that crossed his face was almost painful. "Zuri." Her name sounded like a prayer. "I thought you should be on a plane." "I should be," she agreed. "But I'm not good at doing what I should." He moved toward her, then stopped, uncertainty written across every line of his body. "Why are you here?" "I got an offer today. New visa, Singapore job, clean slate." She stepped further into the room. "I turned it down." "Why?" His voice cracked. "You're free. You don't have to." "I came back angry," Zuri interrupted. "At first, I thought I was angry at you. But I'm not. I'm angry at myself." "For what?" "For falling in love with someone who terrifies me." The confession hung between them like a live wire. Jaemin's breath caught, his careful control finally, completely breaking. "I am terrified every day," he whispered, "that I'll hurt you just by existing in your life." Zuri closed the distance between them. "Then we'll be terrified together." His hands came up to cup her face, shaking, reverent, asking permission with every movement. "Are you sure? Because if we do this, if you choose me after everything." She kissed him. It started gentle, a question, an answer, a promise, then became something desperate. 3 weeks of tension, fear, longing, breaking like a dam that couldn't hold anymore. His hands slid into her hair. Her fingers clutched his shirt. They stumbled backward until her spine hit the wall, and he pressed against her, not rough, but hungry, like a man who'd been starving and finally allowed to eat. "Bedroom," she gasped against his mouth. He lifted her. She wrapped her legs around his waist, their mouths never separating as he carried her down the hallway. They hit the doorframe, laughed breathlessly, kept kissing. Her back met silk sheets. His weight settled over her, careful, asking, waiting. "Tell me to stop," he whispered against her throat, "and I will. Any time. Any reason." She pulled his face back to hers, eyes fierce. "Don't you dare." What followed was worship and war. His hands traced her body like she was sacred, slow, thorough, learning every curve and hollow. She pulled his shirt over his head, let her fingers map the planes of his chest, the scars he'd never explained. When he kissed down her neck, her collarbone lower, she gasped his name like a benediction. "Beautiful," he murmured against her skin. "You're so beautiful it makes me forget how to breathe." She took control then, rolling them over, straddling his hips, showing him she wasn't fragile. Her hands pinned his wrists above his head. His eyes went dark with want. "I'm not breakable," she said. "I know." His voice was wrecked. "You're the strongest person I've ever met." They moved together, urgent and tender, vulnerable and powerful, completely equal. Her nails raked his shoulders. His teeth grazed her throat. They learned each other's rhythms, each other's breaking points, the sounds they made when control finally shattered. Afterward, they lay tangled in sheets that smelled like expensive detergent and sin, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her spine. "So," Zuri said, her voice still breathless. "What now? You're still half destroyed. I'm still visa-less. We're still a complete mess." Jamin's laugh rumbled through his chest. She felt it more than heard it, a sound so rare and genuine it made her smile. "Now we rebuild," he said. "Together. No more contracts? No more protection schemes? Just you and me." His arms tightened around her, making terrible decisions and defending them brilliantly. "I can work with that." She lifted her head to look at him. "But I have conditions." "Name them." "I rebuild my career on my own terms. No handouts, no nepotism, no being known as Han Jae-min's girlfriend who got opportunities because of who she's sleeping with." "Agreed." "What else?" "You go to therapy. Real therapy. To deal with your father's legacy and the fact that you think love is a weakness." His jaw tightened, but he nodded. "What else?" "You teach me to be less afraid." Her voice softened. "Not of powerful men, but of wanting someone. Of needing someone. Of letting someone see me when I'm not strong." He rolled them over, bracing himself above her, eyes serious. "Only if you teach me to be more afraid." "Of what?" "Of becoming someone who forgets that power means nothing if you're alone." He kissed her forehead. "My father died between courses. I don't want to die between anything. I want to die old, exhausted, having lived a life that mattered to at least one person." "One person." "You." Simple. Devastating. True. Zuri pulled him down into another kiss, slower this time, sweeter, full of promises they'd probably break and remake 100 times. "Okay," she whispered against his mouth. "Let's be terrified together." Outside, Seoul blazed with morning light. The city that had tried to crush them both, that had tested them and broken them, and somehow forged them into people who could choose love even when it cost everything. They had no empire. No guarantees. No safety net except each other. And somehow, impossibly, that was enough. 3 months later, Seoul looked different through Zuri's office windows. Not because the city had changed, but because she had. The modest office space in Gangnam bore a brass nameplate, AMBW Consulting, luxury brand strategy. Small, but hers. Built on her terms with clients who valued her brilliance over her proximity to power. Jamin was one of those clients, but not her only one. She'd landed 3 independent contracts in the first month, and her reputation was rebuilding itself brick by careful brick. Her entrepreneur visa had been approved 2 weeks ago. She was staying in Seoul not because she was trapped, but because she chose to. That distinction made all the difference. Jamin's empire looked different too. Smaller, cleaner, stripped of the shadowy networks that had once defined it. He'd walked away from the consortium entirely, rebuilding with transparency that made old allies uncomfortable. Some called him weak now. whispered that Han Jaemin had gone soft, that love had neutered his edge. He didn't care. Tonight, they stood in his newest venture, a gallery in Itaewon showcasing emerging Korean artists. Zuri wore a midnight blue dress that made Jaemin forget how to form coherent sentences. She caught him staring for the third time in 10 minutes. "You're doing it again," she murmured, accepting champagne from a passing server. "Doing what?" "Staring like I'm the only person in the room." "You are." His hand found the small of her back, possessive but gentle. "Everyone else is just decorative." She laughed, that full, genuine sound he'd work his entire life to keep hearing. They circulated through the gallery, his presence beside her steady and proud. No shadows. No secrets. Just two people who'd survived fire and chosen to rebuild in the ashes. Later, in his car with Seoul's lights bleeding past the windows, Zuri turned to him with mischief in her eyes. "You're staring again." "I'm allowed to stare at my girlfriend." "Girlfriend?" She wrinkled her nose. "That sounds so ordinary." Jaemin pulled her close, his voice dropping to that dangerous whisper that still made her breath catch. "You were never going to be ordinary, Zuri Adeyemi." She grinned, her fingers tracing his jaw. "And you were never going to break me, Han Jaemin." His lips brushed her ear, and she felt his smile against her skin. "When I handle you now." She finished the sentence, her voice soft but sure. "The only word I remember is stay." He kissed her then, slow and deep and full of promises they'd keep. Seoul blurred around them, the city indifferent to their small, fierce love. But they'd learned that the most powerful thing wasn't domination or control. It was choice. The choice to stay when leaving was easier. The choice to love when fear was safer. The choice to believe that some things, some people, were worth burning empires for. Some women are born to be conquered. Others are born to teach powerful men the difference between surrender and choice. Zuri Adeyemi was the latter. And Han Jaemin spent the rest of his life grateful she chose him anyway. The end. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more emotional journeys. Drop a comment below. If you were Zuri, would you have taken the Singapore offer or stayed to fight for love? I want to hear your thoughts.